Hello and welcome to The Natural View. I'm Maggie Jacqua. I'm the content director of Whole Foods Magazine, and I'm here with my co-host, Todd Pauley of 24 Stories. Hey, Todd.
Hey Maggie, good to see you.
Good to see you as always. And we have a very special guest today. We have Steve Mister. He is the president and CEO of the Council for Responsible Nutrition, also known as CRN. Hey, Steve.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Yeah, great to have you here. So we're going to cover a lot of ground today. We have a lot that we want to pick your brain about, a lot that we want to be updated on, but kind of at the heart of all of it is one word, and that is responsible. So let's start there. I think most of our audience is familiar with CRN, but for those who aren't, for those who don't know you guys yet, can you tell us a little bit about the history of CRN and, kind of the backstory and what you guys do?
Yes, great. I'm excited to have a chance to talk a little bit about where we've been and where we're headed. We were founded, I guess, 51 years ago now, because we celebrated our 50th last year, by a group of companies that really looked at what was happening in the industry in those days, in the early 70s, and there were three major tenets that they wanted to follow as a collective organization of companies in the industry. One was to recognize that science really needed to drive the policy and the decision-making that was being made. Too much was being done politically. People were making snap judgments about letter vitamins in those days and how much was safe. And they said, look, this is not based on science. So it needs to be based on actual research and findings. And of course, the mantra that we're the science behind the supplements has been part of our name ever since then. The second thing was that there needed to be some guardrails around the industry. They recognized that there was a role for government to play in having some oversight in this industry, but it needed to be a light touch. And certainly we did not want to follow the pathway of pharmaceuticals, but also recognizing that there had to be some guardrails, or else, you would have a buyer beware kind of industry that had no credibility. So they from the very beginning felt like there was a role for government. And then the third piece, and I think we're going to talk about this today, was that at the same time, the companies had to act responsibly. That if we were going to ask government to give us a light touch, we had to demonstrate that we would do the right thing by our consumers and we would act responsibly in the market. And that was the beginning of this whole notion of voluntary programs at CRN, which continue today.
That's great. Well, speaking of today, back just in September, you launched a new campaign, Responsible, it's our middle name. That's the campaign name. So can you give us a little bit of detail behind it, the thinking, what's the goal behind the campaign and why did it launch now?
Yeah, so, actually, the campaign really has three different purposes. One is to celebrate all of the voluntary programs and self-regulatory activities that we have been doing as an association. Secondly, it serves as a little bit of a reminder to our members that, hey, we have all these programs in place. If you haven't dusted them off and looked at them recently, you might want to make sure that you are doing all of the things that we say we're doing. And then the third point of the campaign was really an invitation to the rest of the industry, companies that may not be part of CRN, to take a look at these programs and say, you know what, even if I'm not going to join the association, maybe I should be following these guidelines because they really do help set the industry apart and show that I am, acting in ways that are best for the industry. So those were our three campaign goals, and hopefully we're checking them all off.
Well, nice. Well, let's raise some awareness about some of those individual initiatives. Can you tell us about some? Let's start with the Supplement Al.
Sure. So the Supplement Al really started about 8 years ago now. In some ways, it was kind of a reaction for people who remember the whole New York Attorney General crisis of 2015, when they came after the industry, alleging that the products did not have the DNA of the various herbs and botanicals that they were supposed to have. And again, it was one of those sort of watershed moments where industry realized that even though the Attorney General in New York was dead wrong in the allegations they were making, it was exposing that FDA really did not have that much visibility into the industry. And as companies come and go, there's very little in the way of entry barriers. And so a company could come to market and start selling supplements, and FDA would not even know they were there. And in fact, to this day, FDA has no real accurate count of how many unique products are in the marketplace. And that's kind of a result of the fact that we don't have pre-market review, and we certainly don't want pre-market review of the products, but there needs to be a way for FDA to know who's in the industry. So the Supplement Al is a voluntary, at this point, a voluntary registry where companies put their labels of their dietary supplements, and it's available to anyone who wants to then access it, whether it's FDA or state regulators. Retailers use the database a lot, and consumers, of course, can get to it too. And the idea is to create a registry of what is in the marketplace. And our members now subscribe to the agreement that they will put their products in there as a condition of membership. But certainly there are lots of other companies who just voluntarily choose to put their labels in the Supplement Al as well.
All right, and I think another one, let's work through. Tell us about the Standardized Information of Dietary Ingredients Protocol.
Oh, wow. That's an oldie but a goodie.
Okay.
SIDI, we call it the CD program. So, that was developed shortly after good manufacturing practices became fully enforceable in 2010. And it was an effort to give finished product companies and ingredient suppliers a way to talk in a common language about the ingredients that the dietary supplement products were using. And so it was a prescriptive list of ways to talk about ingredients, how you were measuring for them, how you were identifying them. And so it is, just as it's described, it's a standardized list of ingredients and how to be sure that when you're buying and selling them, you and your vendor are talking in the same language.
And I think another one that kind of goes back in history, but just to show the range of what you guys have been doing. So a program to increase monitoring of supplement advertising. Tell us about that one.
And that's certainly still an issue in the industry today. We certainly still see ads that maybe stretch the truth, go too far. We developed this campaign with the Council of Better Business Bureaus. They have an advertising program that still continues to this day, where companies can challenge their competitors' advertising. So if you think your competitor is saying that their product works 3 times stronger or 3 times faster, or it will cure the common headache, which wouldn't be a permissible claim. A company can challenge that, and it's a very expedited review process. It's much faster and much cheaper than trying to take your competitor to court in some sort of a Lanham action or something like that. And the people at the Better Business Bureau look at the advertising. They give you a chance as the advertiser to bring your substantiation data to the table, show what kind of support you have for your claim, and then they adjudicate whether they think the claim is truthful and not misleading to consumers. And really, that's the standard. It should be truthful and not misleading. So, very similar to the kinds of standards that the Federal Trade Commission would be looking at. And we found that during the time that we were actually funding part of that program to encourage more attention to dietary supplement advertising, as opposed to advertising for vacuums or shampoo or any of the other many things that the Better Business Bureau does. We were able to bring over 300 cases specific to dietary supplements. And what that did was, over about an 8-year period, it created all of this precedent for how companies should evaluate their claims, and how the Better Business Bureau would be likely to look at advertising in all of these various sectors of the supplement space, whether it was weight loss or whether it was claiming heart health or whatever. And so the program does continue today. We are not funding it anymore, but companies can still take advantage of it. And all of those years of legal precedent are still relied upon by the Better Business Bureau when they're looking at ads today.
Excellent. All right. And then there's some new things as well in 2024, some voluntary guidelines. I know melatonin and gummies. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah. So, we haven't even talked about the voluntary guidelines that may be specific to a certain product. The things we've talked about are sort of industry wide so far, but we have voluntary guidelines that are specific to, say, probiotics, or how you measure protein in protein powder. And so two of the things that we have looked at in the last year, one has to do with online sales, e-commerce. And it is, based on the tenet that a consumer should be able, when they're shopping online, to get all of the same information about a dietary supplement that they would get if they were standing in the aisle in a store and reading a label, standing in the aisle, so that they can do comparison shopping and be savvy consumers. So our voluntary guidelines around e-commerce commit our members that anytime they are selling a product online, if they control the platform and have some ability to influence what goes on the site, that they will provide all of the same information that a consumer would get if they were actually reading the label in the aisle. So I think that's that was one. The other thing that we've spent a lot of time looking at this year is melatonin and gummies separately, but of course there's some overlap there. So we've developed cautionary statements that our members will put on the label for melatonin, reminding consumers that the product can cause drowsiness, reminding them to keep the product out of reach of children, reminding them to follow label directions. We have also, and I'm very proud of this, in the case of melatonin that is presented to consumers in a flavored format. Now, that could very well be gummies, but it also might be a chewable or dissolvable tab or something like that. If it's in a flavored format, starting next year, our members commit that those will be in a child deterrent package of some sort. Because, we are seeing a real increase in the number of instances with poison prevention control centers where children are, in many cases, getting into their parents' melatonin. It looks good, it tastes good. Mom comes in and finds the kid sitting there with the bottle open. They, scoop the child up and rush them off to an emergency room or go call the poison control center. And that creates, a bad image for the industry, even though the products are still very safe and there's very little incidence of any kind of follow-up medical intervention. But it's still, it's creating this impression that children are getting into melatonin and they shouldn't be getting into it. So a good way to address that is put those flavored formats in a package that's a little harder for them to get into.
Yeah, remember that was big news, right? And was it the spring with the
yes.
headlines about melatonin kids? Yeah.
And when I look at these voluntary programs, the thing about them is they're never just about codifying what is already happening in the industry or codifying what's already in a federal regulation. It's looking at that as the starting point and then saying, okay, is there more that the industry should be doing in addition to just meeting basic legal requirements? And if there is there a place for the trade association to collectively nudge companies to do that? Sometimes if you're the only one out there and all your competitors are doing something else, it's very hard to do the right thing. But if companies can all come together and say, you know what, this kind of label caution really should be on the label. Everybody should be saying the same things to consumers, and we all agree to do it together. I think that's the value of association. And so we're really glad that we can convene our companies together and develop these kind of programs.
Yeah, that's absolutely key as I talk with clients and they make decisions, whether it's anything from the packaging, how they package a product to marketing ideas or whatever. It is hard there's always a budget decision and a competitive decision. And so the more momentum you get going in one direction for the good is always beneficial. I'm wondering if we can broaden just a minute here to industry wide. Your tenure at CRN you've been around, I think before I joined the industry. How long has it been, Steve?
It'll be 20 years in March.
Okay. So you've seen a lot.
But I've been at CRN. I've been around the industry longer, but I've been in this role at CRN since 2005.
All right. Well, that's great. And I think you've obviously seen a lot in that time. And I'm wondering if you can just give a general assessment in terms of our industry. Are we moving in the right direction in terms of being responsible and doing the right thing for our consumers? I know it's always, it can be a bumpy road at times and issues come up, but what do you think overall?
I think the arc of this industry is absolutely headed in the direction it has been. This industry is doing things now that we wouldn't have done 5 years ago. We're doing things we certainly wouldn't have done 10 years ago to make sure that our consumer understands that they are the center of our focus, and that we are taking their safety and making sure that they're getting products that work as our first priority. So, I think these voluntary programs are one of many ways that you can see that. The willingness of CRN members to support a mandatory registry. So, mandatory listing, many people call that. The fact that we're willing to support that, that FDA would have that kind of authority is, again, pushing us in the direction that this industry needs to go if we're going to keep growing. We're going to talk, I think, about our survey a little bit later. So I'll preview, 3 out of 4 Americans use a dietary supplement. If we're going to continue that kind of momentum, we certainly have to protect the consumer confidence that we have.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to switch gears a little bit. So we are, it's December now. We're about to flip the calendar to 2025. We just had our elections, and so we've got some changes coming. Can you give us kind of a broad overview, a broad outlook forecast on how you anticipate the incoming administration is going to impact our industry?
So, I think there's some just really exciting opportunities for the industry in the next 2 years. We've got some people who are coming into the administration that we know have a different perspective on what integrative healthcare and what preventative healthcare should look like. They're much more friendly to our industry. They see a value in dietary supplements. They get the connection between good nutrition and preventative health and just overall better wellness if you are eating the right things and making sure that you're getting the things in your diet that you need. So all of that, I think, is very positive for the industry, and opens up some opportunities for us to talk about getting dietary supplements in flex spending accounts, which we've had on our wish list now for several years. But I think now the Congress may actually be more receptive to those kinds of messages. On the flip side, though, I think it also does create a little bit of a lightning rod for the industry because some of these people are controversial in their own right, and so their connections with the industry, their willingness to talk favorably about the industry has also, we've already seen, attracted some negative press, and we've been trying to battle some of that recently to make sure that that we're always talking about the value of these products and how well they're made and the quality of them, and not getting into some of the political conversations about whether you're also promoting supplements while you're a sitting cabinet member or something like that. And then I guess the one area where I think there needs to be some trepidation from the industry is around what the trade policy will look like for the next 2 years. When we think about tariffs, there is certainly a role for tariffs, and they can be a very valuable way to influence other countries' behavior, and to even try to onshore more manufacturing. But they have to be used, like a scalpel, not a machete. And I think we have to be really careful, because when we think about how much of our raw material does not originate in the U.S., of course, China is one of the big players, but not the only place where we import from. So I think tariffs is the one area where we're a little bit cautious about what impact that could have on the industry.
Yeah, well, we'll keep with politics, and speaking of a lightning rod, if we could just name a couple of names here and just get reactions. Start with RFK Jr. Obviously has attracted a lot of attention in the industry for some of the favorable supplement comments he's made. But it's also attracted mass media as well, looking at the issue of supplements and some of his health information that he's spread around supplements. So can you talk a little bit about, obviously there's opportunity there for the industry. There could be some drawbacks as well. I'm just curious what you think about him in general from both a positive and negative standpoint for our industry.
Well, we've already had some initial outreach, to his office to make sure that he knows who CRN is and understands the role that we play in the industry. But as I said before, I think generally having him as the head of Health and Human Services would be a good thing for the industry, because we know that at the cabinet level, there is somebody who really sees the value in dietary supplements, sees that there is a role for preventative health. We've been talking for at least 20 years now about moving this country from being a sick care system to a well care system, keeping people healthy in the first place. And I don't know that we've had a lot of success there. Some, but we still very much focus on just treating people after they get sick. This is an industry that really understands the things you do every day can help to keep you healthy in the first place. So I think having someone like him who understands that at the top of the cabinet obviously is going to be very important. More important to us will be who is going to be the FDA commissioner, and Dr. McCary, is the nominee at this point. We know less about his role of supplements, but even there, we've been, sort of nosing around, asking questions of his colleagues at Johns Hopkins, and trying to get to know him. I have both two of his books on my Christmas reading list, so I'll have a chance to get a little bit of a sense on what his background is by the time we get to the first of the year.
Always doing your homework, right?
Always doing my homework.
So as you've been nosing around, any general sense, I mean, I know there's so many question marks, but of what we might expect to see in terms of FDA activity, priorities on issues like mandatory product listing or anything else?
So we know that several things are going to come out of FDA next year. The agency has promised us that they're going to answer our citizens' petition on drug preclusion, and so we expect to have that sometime in the first half of the year. I think that will be really important to get an understanding, not about any particular ingredient, but really what they say in the context of the citizens petition will give us a roadmap on how the agency is going to look at drug preclusion in the future. What are the criteria that they're evaluating ingredients against to decide if they belong to the drug companies? And can a drug company, lay claim to something 20 years ago and then prevent it from ever being a supplement down the road? So I think that's one. The reorganization of FDA's human food program, just was completed in October. I don't foresee that the next administration is going to come in and, undo any of that. I guess it's possible, but I think, now that they put all of this investment into restructuring how FDA works, that's going to stick around. So we're going to be looking to see how FDA makes this new structure work for supplements. Is it actually going to mean more inspectors in the field doing inspections around supplements? Is it going to change the way they look at enforcement? And that's the ironic thing about this industry. On the one hand, we don't want too much enforcement, but I think most players in the supplement space recognize that there needs to be some oversight, or otherwise, we let the bad guys on the fringes of the industry kind of run things. So we need a consistent FDA that's out there doing inspections, that's looking at products, that's evaluating claims. And I don't think that will change because of the administration. The day-to-day enforcement should continue on.
Yeah. It seems clients that we work with, clients that we talk to on the podcast, the good players in the industry, science is such a huge part of their story. They do the work, they do the investment, and that's many of the details that come out in their stories, and that's how they sell their products with a science forward approach. And I'm wondering, over the past several years and then leading, coming into 2025 here, the bigger notion of science and scientists and casting doubt on whether findings are accurate, or how do you find out what the real science is so you can question whether or not it's accurate, or people do. I'm just wondering how those types of issues might have an effect on the supplement companies, the nutraceutical companies that really rely on science to get their message across. And I know CRN has done work here to uphold the science. What can you tell us about that work, and where do you see that going?
Boy, I think that continues to be a very critical part of what we do at CRN, honoring that legacy of being the science behind the supplements. But it's even more critical today. You have science under assault from lots of different angles. There is a growing concern about these journals that publish studies that have never been conducted. I mean, they are literally made up and then put into what appears to be a peer-reviewed journal. So on the one hand, you have companies that, even if you want to be science-based, you have to do your homework now. You can't just, pick up a study and trust that it's accurate. You need to, dig in a little bit more, know who were the researchers, and ask some critical questions. On the other hand, there are people who do research in our space with an agenda and publish these studies that suggest that there is a link between, for instance, we're in the middle of this issue with weight loss and muscle building products. People who would like to suggest that there's a connection between those products and the development of eating disorders among young people. And when you look at the studies, there is no causal link. It's a correlation that also correlates with young people's other behaviors, like, young people who go to the gym a lot or, start to engage in ritualized eating. Those kinds of things, changing those is not going to mean you have fewer eating disorders. They just happen to be things that correlate. So that's the second part is being critical of the research at the same time. And sometimes it's the research that is for you. Sometimes it's the research that goes against you. But being willing to point out that there are weaknesses and flaws in the research, and they don't necessarily show what they're being held up to be. And then, of course, there are some people who would just give us a free rein and say, "Oh, we should be able to say whatever we want." Well, that can't happen either. I mean, we're right back to where we were 51 years ago if we go that route and we take off all the guardrails, because we know that there are people who will be out there claiming to cure cancer and Alzheimer's and things with these products. So companies that want to do the right thing, I think, are on the right path. They've got to make a real commitment to continuing to do research and continuing to very, carefully evaluating other people's research.
And I just want to add a little kind of side note to that. One of the things that I really appreciate that CRN does, you guys do it so well in service to the industry and also to the consumer, is you have rebuttals and responses to when a study is buzzy. And look, I'm in the media. I was in consumer media. Sometimes the reporters see something in a press release and they just love it, and you see it blow up. But you guys will step in and say, okay, here's what this, and really dig into that study. Here's what it found, and here's why these headlines are misleading. So
thank you for Maggie for saying that, because that is an area that I've been very proud of. We call it our triage, because we try to get those studies even before they're published, if we can get them while they're still under embargo. We have a great science team here that really critically evaluates what's there. If it's a well-done study and, there's nothing you can say about it, then we're not going to go out there and just make stuff up. But if there are flaws in the research, if there are mischaracterizations or overgeneralizations, we're going to be right out there in front of it, calling it out for what it is.
Yeah, because you'll see those headlines spread like wildfire when they have something they think is juicy. And I always like to look and see, like, how does that headline evolve as more media picks it up? And you'll see it get more twisted. And sometimes it's just wild.
It's like a game of telephone, right? I mean, they keep reporting on each other and it gets wilder and wilder.
Yes.
Yeah, and the details drop off. Do you remember, like, this is probably decades ago, but something about eating dark chocolate, and if you ate it, you could possibly like achieve some of the effects of cannabis. And then if you look back, it was like, I don't know what it was, 28 pounds in one sitting or something. All those details were lost in the clickbait headlines that come out. So
yeah,
exactly.
Clickbait, yeah. All right, so I want to kind of go back to something that you started to talk about. I want to shift to these state actions. So in the summer, we talked to retailers about advocacy efforts, and we touched on the state actions, and we had people saying, well, it's not in my state. This doesn't really impact me. And I don't see it as an issue. But fast forward 6 months, and more states are involved in this efforts to age restrict access to certain supplements. And you were talking about the research a little bit just a minute ago about the weight loss and the bodybuilding. Can you give us an update on where we stand overall? And then I know you guys are taking action in New York. So any updates there?
Yes. Well, I think this is the biggest issue that should be concerning retailers, at this point, because it is a real threat to their ability to sell dietary supplements by people who are just don't like the industry and are trying to scapegoat us as the problem, without really having any evidence behind their claims. So these bills that would restrict weight management products and sports nutrition products to anybody who's under 18 have been out now for about 8 years. Or we started seeing the first ones in Massachusetts years ago, and we've had, obviously have a state government affairs program where we've been out there, fighting these bills, and we've had a pretty good track record. Although each year we see more. So more states, in fact, just in the last few weeks, we know that there are pre-files for Texas and New Hampshire. So that means that when those legislatures come into session in 2025, there are already bills waiting there for them for consideration, that they've already been pre-filed in the state house. And we've got other states that are coming back. So we're expecting that we'll have it probably in at least 10 states. The one bad area was we were not able to stop the bill in New York. We killed the bill there in 2022. The legislature brought it back the next year, passed it again, and then in October of 2023, the governor signed the bill. So it did go into effect last spring, and it does place age restrictions on a whole swath of products. And that's part of the problem with these bills, is that they're so vague because they're not just based around a particular ingredient. It's how the product is being marketed, how it's being placed into the market, where it sits in the store can make it a weight loss or muscle building product. And, that's the term of art they use. So we sued the state of New York last spring, alleging that this is a violation of the First Amendment, that it's a restriction that is based off of the claim, and that we have a First Amendment right, even under the commercial speech doctrine. You have a right to tell consumers things that are truthful, and states cannot restrict that by limiting access to the product because they don't like what you're saying. So after a lot of arguing back and forth on motions to dismiss and early standing arguments, our lawsuit has advanced. We're the only lawsuit that's still out there challenging the New York law. We appealed up to the Second Circuit because the district court did not give us the preliminary injunction that we wanted. We wanted to have a preliminary injunction that would have stopped any enforcement of the law while we were litigating this case in the courts. So we've appealed that up to the Second Circuit, and we've just received word that our oral argument will be on January 24th. So we'll be arguing that and hopefully getting a decision back from the Second Circuit soon thereafter. Meanwhile, the underlying case is continuing to move along at the district court level. But what we're hopeful is that the Second Circuit will agree with us that there are serious constitutional violations and that the law should be halted from any enforcement until this case is over.
Yeah, and that's going to be so important then for all these other states too, right? Just this.
Yeah, and I
really
think
watching this.
A message to the retailers is, if you have one of these bills in your state, you are absolutely impacted by it. Even if you think, oh, well, I don't sell hardcore muscle building products. These go well beyond what we typically think of as weight loss. Some of this legislation is worded in such a way that if you use the word metabolism on the label or use the word muscle anywhere on your labeling or in your advertising, the proponents of the bill say, well, that's a trigger that you're really a weight loss product. And so those products would be pulled in. And that might even include like a multivitamin.
Yeah, so I think that's such an important point, just to drive that home, because that is something that we heard from, I think just one person that we talked to said that, well, I don't sell those hardcore weightlifting. That's not my scene. And frankly, if it gets, they kind of indicated if it gets, more regulations, that's fine with me. And it's like,
yeah, well, and that's the problem when you try to regulate products on this very vague way of saying, well, it's all about how the product is marketed. It's the claims you make. You could have, two products that have the same ingredient in them. One of them because of the claim, is going to be restricted. The other one is not. As a retailer, how do you know that up front? How do you know which one has to be put in a, behind the counter and which one can be on the self-service shelf? It gets very complicated very quick. So retailers do have a lot to lose in all of this.
Yeah, not to mention from a retailer standpoint, just the practical aspects of, especially some of the traditional retailer stores, they don't have a lot of shelf space. Where does this go? Are they really going to separate out those products? Some of them may just say, well, I'm going to move on to some other category. And while it's age restricted, I think there could be bigger ramifications as far as product access for everyone, just by ease of, how does this get fulfilled if it's passed?
Todd, that's exactly the argument that we have been making, is that when you try to impose age restrictions on a limited class to keep them from getting the product, it necessarily means access restrictions for everyone, because the 35-year-old and the 50-year-old can't shop the aisle and hold, two products in their hand and look at them and make the choice about what's right for them. They're craning their neck over the counter trying to read what's back there behind the pharmacy. And, can you hand me the red label? Well, can you hand me the blue label? Well,
yeah,
that means people end up walking out and saying, I'm just not going to bother with it. So it means lost sales for us, and it means lost access for consumers.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
Well, that is the low note. Although we will be staying tuned for January 24th, and and Whole Foods Magazine will, as soon as you guys let us know what's going on, we will share that news. But let's end on a high note. So CRN has your annual consumer survey on dietary supplements, and you really take a deep dive into the state of the industry. So many data points. People can really get some great information on usage and attitudes about supplements. So 2024, you had some good news I have here. Let me just lean in so I can see 75% usage rate, and that's in line with last year's data. So good news. But there were some shifts in product choices. Can you tell us some of the things that you found particularly interesting out of this year's survey?
Yes. So some of the bright notes, as you mentioned, 3 out of 4 of Americans say they use a dietary supplement. We certainly have, wide penetration among consumers. But what's even more interesting is when you ask those 75% of Americans what role the dietary supplement has in their health regimens, 91% of the users say that their supplements are essential, and that's the word that they pick, is essential to their overall health and wellness regimens. And so, that tells us that not only are people using them, but they see the value of them, and that they understand how essential they are. We also look at the number of products that people use, and that is starting to inch up again this year. So, people who are users, they might have started with just a multivitamin, and now they're adding something else to the regimen. The amount of money that they spend on supplements is going up a little bit. Now, obviously, some of that is a result of price increases, but some of it goes beyond that to, they're buying more supplements, so they're spending more on these products. Not surprisingly, where the biggest categories is multivitamin is still the largest category, but it's always interesting to see some of the other smaller categories that are moving and taking more and more market.
That's great. It's always good to see those results come out and just as a member of the industry, take a look and see where things are moving. And I'm wondering, other members of the industry, where can they go to get this survey? Is it CRN website?
It's available from our website. We do have some top line data that we make available to the industry for free. But for companies who want to get access to all of the data, we are selling it for $2,500. And that gives you access to all the charts. We look at where people buy supplements. We look at what ingredients are increasing and decreasing. We break out what kinds of consumers, on all kinds of demographic points, which ones are growing their share, which ones are reducing their share. We also look at attitudes towards dietary supplements, and then we look at other healthy behaviors. And I think one of the interesting things that we keep finding when we look at supplement users, there is this myth, I think, among some of our critics that dietary supplement users pop a pill and then they sit on the couch and you often will hear them talk about the magic bullet. The consumer data just does not support that at all. And what we find is that people who are using dietary supplements are more likely to exercise. They are more likely to see their doctor. They're more likely to try to eat a balanced diet. They're more likely to watch their weight, less likely to smoke. So what we see is that dietary supplement usage is part of this constellation of behaviors among people who are trying to take charge of their health. And so when you hear the other side say, well, dietary supplements are just something that people pop a pill and believe that they've done everything they need to do, that just means they don't understand our consumers at all.
Yeah, absolutely. That type of consumer, if you talk to someone who isn't necessarily leading a healthy lifestyle, and sometimes they look at the finish line and think, oh, that's so hard. But I always try to explain, if you're trying to run a race, if you're trying to eat healthier, if you take those steps, something happens in your brain where you just want to, I guess you feel the results, right? And you just want to keep going and inching along. Before you know it, you're one of those people that you thought you couldn't be at one point. And so that makes a lot of sense, hearing the survey data and knowing it's part of a whole lifestyle. And that's encouraging to hear.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a perfect example of that. I take a handful of supplements in the morning, another handful in the evening, and I never thought that, I would get to a point where I would see the benefit from, but boy, I see it myself. And so I understand why consumers are saying they see the essentiality of the products too.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so you have covered so much ground about the work that CRN does, the challenges that our industry is facing, and kind of the need to be involved. So for people who aren't involved yet, but kind of want to get more involved, know the importance of advocacy. Hopefully, we've helped make the point. Can you just offer any final takeaways for us on why engaging with our industry trade associations are kind of key to the collective success of our industry, and how they can get involved with CRN?
Well, I would say I think CRN sort of is the one that the company should look for to join, because we offer such a variety of benefits to our members. I mean, we are out there, certainly, as you say, being the advocate for the industry. We're on Capitol Hill. We're in the halls of FDA and the FTC. We're in the state legislatures. But we also have an international program. And so, we're at the Codex meetings, and we're making sure that international trade policy is favorable to our products. And that's just the advocacy. And then we have all of the education that we do around our industry that helps keep our members up to speed on what's coming and what's new at FDA, new regulations, new guidance. And then there's all the voluntary programs that we talked about at the beginning of this. That's a huge part of who we are, and no other association takes that kind of approach to gather their members together and say, let's do the right thing. Let's go do what's right for our consumer. Our website is the best place to get started. We're obviously a membership organization, so we're dependent upon companies in the industry who want to be a part of shaping what the industry is going to look like in the future. And we're always accepting new members.
Excellent. All right, Steve, thank you for getting us up to speed on everything. As I said, we'll stay tuned in for the news that comes out of this New York lawsuit. We are looking forward to an update on that and everything else that you guys have going on. So keep us posted.
Well, thank you again. Here's to a great new year.
That's right. Thanks, Steve.